Hey guys, MaSsanSC here. First thing first, I will be going away for a month. That means I won't be uploading any videos for about a month, and after that I'll be resuming. That's because I'm Korean and all Koreans must go to military. Well, men's only. Don't know why. For now I'll be just entering training camp and I'll be back after a month, and then we'll be resuming putting up the videos and streaming. But until then, just decided to upload the Goblin vs. Gnome card review that has been released so far. Every card that will be released, not every card, a lot of cards that will be released are actually decided on your vote on Blizzard website. You can check it out here. That's this week's edition. Looks like a priest card and paladin card. I don't know. I haven't played a while, so I don't know what those two cards are, but anyways, here they are. Here it is, starting right here. It's Clockwork Gnome. It's a 1-drop death roll. Add a spare part card to your hand. I'll be going over all the spare cards in a little bit, but for now, looking at this kind of cards, it looks like they're going to be adding a lot of cheap machine cards, mainly for machine aggro deck, which I will explain a little later why I think that's true. But anyways, by itself it doesn't look that decent. It's like Leper Gnome, but instead of dealing 2 damage, it gives you spare parts, which is like a half a mana. Well, less than, yeah. That card, I think the spare card costs about 1/2 mana. So this card gives you 1.5 mana for 1 mana, which is not the best compared to cards like Undertaker. This card is absolutely not worth. However, the card value of this card might go up if you actually have mechanical, very aggressive deck. Next is a Cogmaster. By the way, the card size is not consistent. That's because I'm just bringing up the quick video before I leave. I actually leave in 12 hours. Well, I entered the training camp in 12 hours. Anyways, Cogmaster. The similar thing has +2 attack while you have a mech. So there's a card that I'll explain later that gives you basically unlimited amount of cards as long as you have an unlimited amount of mana. And it's just gonna synergize with this mech deck. But I don't know how efficient it will be. We haven't seen all the cards, and in current meta, this card really doesn't shine. But later on it'll get better probably. But interesting, this card is not a mech, but it gets buffed from a mech. Moving on, Anoia Tone. Ugh. It's a 2-drop, 1/2 taunt divine shield, means that this guy can take 2 shot, but that's about it. It's basically better version of that. What's that monkey card? It's a 1/4 taunt for 3 mana. It's just better version of that. It's better version of taunted Argent Squire. I don't think the 1 health and taunt makes the 1 full mana worth, so I can't value this card really high unless there are very, very valuable card you want to protect, such as Cogmaster in very aggressive deck with a very, like, every card would be like 1 to 2 drops. In those decks it does seem to make sense, otherwise I don't think it's worth it to have it. But then again, if the meta says, hey, you have these big giant chunky cards and you have to attack twice to get through these cards, then it might be worth it. Such as against the Henlock, this card might be really decent, although it will be probably silenced. Because the mech deck doesn't seem to have that good of silenced target. Moving on, Explosive Ship. First thing comes into my mind is the mage making this deck, making this card just like Consecrate, but it also deals 2 damage to your minions. So Freeze Mage sounds really good with this deck. I can't really think of the cards that lacks AoE that needs this card in current meta, but in future meta it might make it work. But then in future meta, the silence might become strong as well. So Yeah, for now I can only think of mages, freeze mage especially, because they do like early AoE. Next one is a mech warper. Your mech costs 1 less. So, comes down to, again, this is just very cheap mech cards just being swarmed. I can't really think of anything else. I mean, this card is like Sorcerer's Apprentice, but instead of magic, it's for mech cards. So in those swarming mech deck, this card will be awesome. But then again, the Sorcerer's Apprentice should be awesome, but it's not used unless you're using combo deck, so it might just become like that. I guess you also use that card in aggro decks, which I think if you're swarming your board with the mech cards, then you're playing aggro deck. So next one, it says at the start of each turn, gain +1 attack. It is noteworthy that it doesn't say end of your turn, it says end of each turn, meaning this card will get buff every turn, including your opponent's turn. So this card is like by default 2/2, and on your turn it becomes 3/2. So if you can throw this guy down on empty board, this guy is amazing. Or this guy might be able to do some heavy lifting with the NOA taunt early on, but otherwise it's a very vulnerable, and I don't see too much value in it in current meta with a lot of death rolls, because there's a huge ton of big number of death rolls should be able to clear 1/2 easily, or just anything with a 2 health, and this thing costs 2 mana. And it's like Knife Juggler, but then Knife Juggler has a possibility to deal a lot more than one extra damage per turn. Also splits the damage, so it's more valuable. Also synergized with the cards like the Unleashed Doggy or any of Death Roll cards actually, Hunted Creeper. Whereas this guy only synergizes with the mech, and that's not a huge benefit for so far. Maybe all the mech cards will become. Maybe there's a card that has a huge synergy with the mech cards, for example, like, oh, actually, there is one. But then this card is a little too vulnerable. I'll get to that huge synerging mech cards in a bit. Goblin Auto Barber. This card, it says, give your weapon +1 attack. Just looking at it, this card doesn't look that good. But if you think about it, the rogue by itself, by default, it has 1 attack, 2 dagger on hero power, and hero power becomes a 2/2, which means the rogues are able to clear those early threats a lot easier. So, thinking of the current rogue meta, a lot of aggro decks does give rogue hard time, and this might be the answer. Also, it's a 3/2 body, so it's pretty solid at clearing early threats. But just looking at it, it's not like, it's obviously not board swinging cards, but I can see some good synergy with double Blade Flurry, or it's just extra reason to have an AoE cards, to have a synergy cards with the Blade Flurry. I've been looking at a lot of cards, and a lot of mech cards does not have extra life like Death Rattle, so Blade Flurry might become awesome. And Goblin versus Gnome, we'll see. Next card, Spider Tank. This card is the only 3-drop that has the 3/4 that is not the Dark Cultist. That is Priest card. But then Priest was very, very undervalued before that came out. And 3/4/3/4 has proven its worth so far. It's been decent. It's just a solid all-around card, I think. But 3-drop 3/4 does die to things like Yeti, or it does die to some of the 4 or 5 drops easily. So again, it's one of the cards really hard to value without seeing other mech synergizing cards. I wish there was a Death Roll mech that spawns with mech units, just like a Haunted Creeper, but haunted spiders will also be a mech, but it's not. It's not a beast, whereas a Haunted Creeper is. In those cards, I can see it being useful. I guess you know what, I got off topic. Anyways, it will be just one of the very solid, well-rounded cards. A lot of aggro decks do like 3-drop that does the damage. A lot of the Zoo deck or a lot of the other decks will use, unless you're playing Hunter, in which case you have an awesome 3-drop called Animal Companion. But if you're not playing that, if you're playing Zoo deck or any other aggro deck, the 3-drop is your weakness. You have a Horror Golem, which is kind of defensive card. It's a basically 2/4 for 3 mana. So this card, with the other synergizing cards, might become really good. We'll see. Also, it synergizes pretty well with the cards that... What was the card's name? Hang on. Mech Warper. Your mech cost 1 less. But yeah, with the cards like that, 3-drop like this is very valuable since it becomes a 2-mana 3/4. Next one is a Tinktown Technician. It's 3/3 for 3 mana is an awful card, but if you got the Battle Cry, if you control a mech, gain +1/+1 and put a spell card in your hand. This card is a 4/4 for 3 mana. If you have a mech, which is we've seen so many mech cards that are very cheap, it's gonna be really easy to get them. If you control mech, gain 1/1 and put a spell part in your hand. So, like I said, spell card is like in half mana costing card. Well, I value it that much. So this card is basically giving you 4/4 and a half mana, which I would say it's like +1 health. So this guy is basically Yeti for 3 mana. We've seen a lot of mech cards that are pretty weak and not as viable, and cards like this can definitely buff up those mech decks, especially the aggro ones. So you can always combo it. You can always throw this guy down with the another mech cards. This guy might not be game changing, but it's definitely one of the strongest cards, especially on 3-drop. So next is the Paladin Shredder. Death Roll. Summon a random 2-cost minion. In any case, about a third of cards in any 1 through 4 mana is not really worth anything. It's basically worth 1 mana less. But then the other 2/3 or 1/3 are good, 1/3 are kind of average, and 1/3 is bad. In average, you're just gonna get 2 mana for either 2/2 with the extra buff or extra something, or 2/3 or 3/2. So if you are really generous about stats, this card is basically 6/6 for 4 mana, which is amazing. However, it does die easily because it's 4/3, trades with a 2-drop, but then he summons another 2-drop, so it doesn't lose in its value. It still will be able to get under 2-drop out. So I can see this card being really good. Also is the one of the cards, like, so far Silence has not been that high of a value. Silence is like 1.5 mana to 1 mana. If you think about if you think about Spellbreaker, if you think about Keeper of the Groves, but this card actually gives you 2 custom minion on spot, so the value wise it's better than Silence, so that's why I like this card. Although 2 costing mana might not be a mech and it might not have other synergy, beside the fact that it is already a mech to start with. It will just give you huge board control. I can already see mech aggro being real decent, especially the Warlock ones. Next, ooh, that's a pretty big one. Ooh, what does it? Anodize Robocup. Taunt, choose 1/+1 attack, +1 health. It's one of the cards that is not really valuable in my opinion. 2/3 or 3/2, regardless of a taunt or not, it's not really valuable in current meta. I'm explaining everything in current meta. It's not has to do anything with the meta before Naxxramas or anything about to come. Like, Naxxramas has changed every meta so much. Excuse me for a second. Naxxramas came out with the 50 or ish cards, and it changed so much of the meta. And I can't imagine what 120 extra will do. Although there are a lot more cards in pool because Naxxramas cards are already in there. But I really personally can't really see this card being decent, except the part that it has a taunt, so it's just an extra body. Maybe if a Druid mech cards can come up, then it could be a decent one. Just because mech has a super good synergy, which we haven't seen yet. But until then, I have to say this card is pretty worthless. Although you can choose between 3/2 and 2/3, so it's a little more valuable than the other 2-drops, except that when you're playing 2-drops, you probably want to protect it because the 2-drops do have kind of high efficiency as far as the stats per mana goes. It has 5 stat for 2 mana, whereas, for example, Yeti or other 4-drops, 5-drops will typically give you stats times 2 plus 1 equals the total stats. Wait, no, mana costing. Mana cost times 2 plus 1 is a typical, like, good solid stat. This guy does follow the rules, but it's more valuable when you're playing 2-drops because the extra 1 stat comes into factor. Let's move on to next one. Flame Cannon. Deal 4 damage to random enemy minion. This card, from the moment I look at it, alright, this card just kills what's that? The Gadgeton Auctioneer that is hidden, or any of the 4 health minions. In Naxxramas, a lot of cards either have extra life with Death Rattle or have 5 health, so it's not really valuable in current meta, but in future meta, maybe 4 damage might become important again, because before Naxxramas, 4 health minions were... Not 4 health minions weren't as important, but 4 attack was very important. And it might become that way again, where it's 4 attack does matter because all the death rolls are gone. In which case I can say being very, very valuable. It doesn't freeze compared to Frostbolt also, but it deals 1 extra damage to a random minion instead of chosen. Let's move on to the next one. Shrinkmeister. This card is the ultimate combo priest cards with actually, I'm actually curious how this will synergize with the MaSsanSC. Wait, no, Crazy Alchemist. I'm sorry, not MaSsanSC. That's a secret one. That gives the +2 health after, or not? Anyway, so give minion -2 attack this turn. And that means you can Shadow Menace, you can Cabal Shadow Priest your opponents at will, or you can make a use of the Shadow Word Pain really easily, because you can destroy anything up to 5 attack minion, which is pretty easy to find. And the fact that it's a 3/2, I guess it won't survive a turn, but it will make it worth, I think. It's like Crazy Alchemist. When people used to use Crazy Alchemist, it's not because it has amazing stats, it's 2/2 for 2 mana, but the fact that it's just so useful, it's just so flexible with the other priest cards made the card worth, and it might become that way again. Next card is the Balance Chosen. Give a minion +2 attack, +4 health and spell damage. There aren't that many spells that is affected by spell power in priest card. I can think of, well, there are not that many, like Holy Fire, Holy Nova, Holy Smite. Is that about it? Wait, Holy Nova, Holy Fire, Holy Smite. That's about it for now. Besides Mind Blast, which I rather not use with a Balance Chosen. But in Arena, this card would be amazing since the +2/+4 means that this minion will, the whatever you put it on will almost guarantee survive and will be a threat on board. So I think it probably is worth it in arena, but in constructed I don't see it being useful yet until we see more cards. Maybe we'll see a lot more spells in priest that does damage. Next card is Illuminator. It's one of the cards that was voted, I think. Or is it? Actually, I'm not sure. Anyways, if you control Secret and the return restore 4 health to your hero. This card is basically another extra ice block. So I can see it on, I can see Blizzard trying to make the freeze mage a thing again. But it's giving reasonable, it's not giving a huge buff to the deck, it's just giving a reasonable card. Only secrets that will last forever is Ice Block and Ice Barrier. Not necessarily Ice Block, but ice, not necessarily Ice Barrier, but Ice Block will definitely last until you die, right? So it's plus 4 health to your hero for 3 mana, and it has a 4 body, which your opponent probably needs to remove. So basically it's a 4 health to your hero, if you have taken damage already, which we probably have if you're playing Freeze Mage and past turn 3. Or when you have a Seeker, you probably took some damage. So it's just another alternative cards that will just fill up the board and buy you time until you can burst your opponent down. So I do like it, otherwise I don't see it being useful. Hunter... Only other classes that runs the Secret is Hunter and Paladin. Paladin already have enough heals that are pretty efficient, in my opinion. And their secrets don't last. Their secrets will be revealed next turn, so I don't think you want to use it just for the fact that it heals a 4 health this turn. It's a threat because it continuously heals a 4 health of your hero if you're playing Freeze Mage, so you have to remove it by next turn. In fact, if you don't remove it by next turn, let's say you have a freeze spell and you play Illuminator, and that card is worth 12 health to you, or maybe more for 3 mana, because your opponent still needs to remove it next turn. Next, Goblin Sapper has a plus 4 attack while your opponent has 6 or more cards in hand. It's one of the control card counters. I can see Blizzard trying to make a huge variety between control versus aggro deck. Nextremus kind of has made the boundary a little bit blurry because every deck runs a lot of Death Rattles. Every deck, not every deck, but a lot of decks runs Undertaker. A lot of decks will run Haunted Creeper. A lot of decks will run other Death Rattle cards. So they're definitely trying to make the meta move away from that, and everyone playing kind of same set of the cards. So not everyone will play control, not everyone will play aggro. If everyone plays a control, there's a general control counter card, which there are none at the moment, except the part that you can just swarm your opponent if you're playing Hunter or Zoo. So I'm really liking this card. Plus 4 attack is a 6 attack if your opponent has 6 or more cards in your hand. Although I don't see this card being valuable at all in arena, because it's not that hard to reduce your hand down to 6 or less in arena post turn 5. But then it still is a 2/4 by itself, so maybe you can see it in tournaments and not necessarily in constructed sin. Yeah, that's my consent on it. Next one is a Jeeves. It's one of the cards that... Alright, I will just read it off first. At the end of each player's turn, that player draws until they have 3 cards. Remember how I talked about how there are a lot of mech cards that are very, very cheap. So if you have 2 Jeeves, you can literally just have every card in your hand 1 to 2 drops, not even 5 mana. You don't need a Doomguard, although it probably is beneficial to do so. You don't need Darkened Dwarf. You don't need those cards that are not as good just because... But you still want it because you're going to run out of cards really early and you're just going to die if you don't have those cards to back you up. But this just solves every problem of not having... Yeah, with this card, if you draw it at proper time, which you might be able to do in future with future cards. I don't know if they're gonna put any synergy. It's like, hey, draw Jeeves if you draw into this card. Maybe they'll have a card like that. It'll be like the demon sensor. I actually forgot the exact name of it. It'll be. I'm really interested to see the aggro mech deck and its counter in near future in Golden versus Gnomes. Next card is a weapon, Ogre Wormhole. I don't actually know if this card is limited to any specific class, like Warrior, which is what everyone is guessing. It has 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy, but it has a 4 attack and 2 duration. I don't actually know how this card will be any worth. I think I can see it being useful in Aggro Warrior, but then I think Aggro Warrior probably want the other options. But then it does get through taunts. It does get through. I think it also gets through Conceal. So in that case, it might be worth it. Like your opponent could have just bunch of taunt minions and you have no way to attack into your opponent except that you can Ogre Morale and you have 50% chance to hit face. Then this card is amazing. Also the fact that it has the warriors, a lot of warriors do have the Fireworks and Deathbite. So there's, if you just run one of each or 2 Fireworks, 1 Ogre Morale, 1 Deathbite, it does fill up the gap a little bit. Because as a warrior, if you're going against aggro, if you don't have things like Fireworks or early 2-drops, you're gonna just have to wait until turn 4 to play Deathbite, and by that time you might be dead if you're going first. Yeah, it's one of the cards that's really hard to value, but I can definitely see it being useful in aggro decks. Next is the Recombobulator. Battlecry transfer a minion into. Transfer a friendly minion into random minion with the same cost. Well, this card is very valuable in a scenario where you're already attacked into a minion, but then your minion survived, whereas your opponent didn't. And even then, it might not be as worth it because it doesn't bring its battle cost to the battlefield. Meaning, I did talk about it kind of, about a third of cards are bad, about a third of cards are okay, but then it might have cards like special effects like the Battle Cry, and about a third of cards are good. So, if you transfer a 4 minion into a 4-drop minion, it's not really gonna be worth 4-drop minion because the Battle Cries are gone. In average, you're gonna get something like 3.5 drop worth. So in a deck that does a lot of trades and has a lot more health than attack, for example, if you have a 3/4 mech cards for 3 mana cost, we kind of seen, and then you transform it into another 3-drop, then it might be worth it. Although that 3-drop might be Magna Razor. This is one of the cards that I can definitely see being really highly valued in Arena, but not necessarily constructed. Again, I don't know what the survivability of the new cards coming up, so we'll just have to wait until more cards pop up. If there are more good cards coming out for the mana cost, then this card's value is gonna go up automatically. Enhancer Mechano. This card is the alternative to Defender Vargas. It's the same stat, not exactly same stat, same total stats. Defender Vargas is 2/3, whereas this card is 3/2. But then Battlecry give your other minions Windfury, Taunt, or Divine Shield. If you can make, I can only actually at the moment I can only see this card being useful in maybe Zoo, because of the 1/3 chance getting, well, 2/3 chance of getting Windfury or Divine Shield. Taunt isn't really necessarily good, especially when you have cards that you want to protect, and that gets a taunt, and you're that's gonna just die. But in a deck like Shaman, imagine every totem getting a taunt, or taunt totem getting Divine Shield, or something like that, and you can buff it if it has a Wind Fury later on with a Flanking Totem or a Rock Biter. Yep, I can definitely see it happening. I can definitely see this card replacing Argus in Shaman deck. Otherwise, I don't see it being too useful in current meta. But like I said, we'll have to see if this card can buff like 5 other cards, because it says give your other minions, so it buffs every other cards on your board. So if you can have a deck where every single card you have is like 1 to 4 drop, and a lot of them are 1 to 2 drop. So you're gonna have like 5 to 6 cards on the board when by the time you play this card, then it could be a really amazing card as well. Next is the Poly the Sky Golem. Summon Death Roll, summon and random forecast minion, but this guy is a 6/4. So let's compare it to other 6 drops like Cairn or Ogre, which is a 6/7 for 6 mana. So this card is costing, I guess equivalent would be summon a 6/3 compared to the Ogre, because 6/4 and 6/3, or maybe summon a 6/2 on Death Roll instead, because the max health being 4 might have an effect. Like this card could take a Fireball and then another 4 drop comes out. It's amazing. Whereas the Ogre just dies to Fireball. So it definitely depends on the meta and what classes are popular. But then this card also dies to Flame Strike, so maybe not as good against the Mage as I initially thought. Summon a 4-cost minion. Just straight out comparing to Cairn, this card is a down trade from the Cairn. But then the fact that it has a 6 attack might put a value on aggro decks. It's like Jaime, but then instead of having 2/2/2s, you have a random 4-cost minion, which might be worth it. Like in average, I say 4-cost minions will have 4/4, mainly because of Battle Cries. Otherwise, it will be a little bit less than that, or a little bit more than that. I actually don't remember the math. Let's see if I have it. No, I don't. So yeah, until if there are more 4-drop cost minion that has high value, then it's probably worth it. Otherwise, it's just low down trade. As a control aspect, if you're playing control deck, this card will not be played. But in aggro deck, I can see it being useful sometimes. But then if you're playing aggro decks, you probably has the other better answers. So this card is in a little iffy position. Although this card will be like definitely off the top priority in Arena. Next, Clockwork Giant. So this card is the giant countering giant cards. Handlocks, the Giant Mage will get destroyed by Clockwork Giant, or maybe because the Blizzard want the Freeze Mage to come back, they want the counters, such as a Clockwork Giant, which is kind of hard to remove. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Cost 1 less for each card in your opponent's hand, so at most this card will cost 2 mana. Oh man, if you're a Henlock, you get Giant out on turn 5, let's say, after Twilight Trek turn 4, then you have a double Clockwork Giant for 2 mana and 3 mana on your turn 5. That'll be scary. I like the fact that this card is affected by your opponent's hand, not yours. But then again, this card, because of that nature, this card might be limited to the constructed tournaments aspects. Wait, tournament aspects of constructed. There are a lot of aggro cards that's coming out, or a lot of decks that are recommended that are being pushed. that or it has a good synergy. So this card might not be as good if the control meta doesn't exist post the Goblin versus Gnome come out. That's all I have to say about this card. Honestly, it's an 8-8. It's a giant. That's decent, right? In Arena, I can see this card being used for 6 or 7 mana, which it would be pretty good. Or maybe actually 7 to 8 mana. I imagine by turn 7 or 8, your opponent's gonna have like 4 to 5 cards or less. Next, Ancestor's Call. Put a random minion from each player's hand into battlefield. So this card will be amazing if you can pull out cards like Cairn, Ragnaros, other heavy cards. But if you think about it, current meta says shamans have a lot of death roll cards to have good board system ability, such as Haunted Creeper or Harvest Golem. But then it also has cards like the Firemental that is worth 5-6 mana. So you can just replace one of those heavy cards, relatively heavy cards, into this. Wait, actually you can't. Maybe you can find like a card spot. This card is really hard to value because I don't know how heavy control Shaman post the Goblin versus Gnome is gonna work. If you can have this card, if you can play this card and plays the Earth Elemental, which time to time it appeared in the tournaments and the Constructed Sin, but as soon as it came out, the Big Game Hunter kind of came back in, and those cards kind of get shredded by the Game Hunter. So yeah, I can definitely see it coming. I can definitely see it being useful in some aspect. But then at the same time, a lot of Shaman cards will also have Battle Cry. Not a lot of Shaman cards. Yeah, some of the key Shaman cards that are heavy has Battle Cries, such as Firemental, such as Lothab. Although Lothab is not limited to Shaman card, but it's just gonna come out as 5/5 for 4 mana, I suppose. This card will be definitely be played in fun decks, but in Constructed, I'm not so sure. Maybe if there's a Control Warrior version of the Shaman deck post batch, but we haven't. The Shaman needs a little bit of more removals that are cheap for make that work, in my opinion, because Control Warriors just have super efficient removals. Should block 1 mana cost, kills everything as long as you have a shield. Execute, as long as the minion is damaged, it kills. It just dies automatically, right? The Shaman needs cards like that for the heavy control cards to work. So maybe there's a deck will rely on having Ancestral Call out, but with just a bunch of spells instead of minions, instead of heavy minions. But then still have a few heavy minions, such as Alakir, Maligos. Then you can just play all the cheap minions down, and with a bunch of spell in your hand, you can play Ancestral Call, and you're gonna have those cards out. Maybe it can work like that. Otherwise, I don't see this card being working out. Next, Bouncing Blade. This card I think might replace the Big Game Hunter. It's an awesome card versus control heavy deck, but then not necessarily good versus Henlocks, because the Henlocks will also tends to have small minions such as an Owl, Defensive Warriors that is 2/3, Sunfury Protector that is 2/3, or the Farseer that is 3/3, and they'll be behind the taunts. But then you have a Clockwork Giant to counter those cards, so Blizzard is just giving us a lot of options. Bouncing Blades is an awesome card. It synergizes really well with the other cards that Warrior already have, such as, oh my god, there are so many cards that synergize with this type of cards that I can't list everything, but basically Acolyte Pain, Armor Smith, Execute, like anything. I can see this card definitely being useful in current meta. In future meta, it might be different. I don't see this deck being really useful in against an aggro deck unless warriors have another form of AoE. But then yeah, actually this deck along with the ghoul and other few other AoE cards, I can see it being really good in tournament aspect as well. But we'll have to see just what meta takes us after Goblin versus Gnome come out. Next one is a Blingtron 3000. The first thing I think of this card is Harrison Jones. Equip a random weapon for each player. But this card sucks if you just look at the stats. 5 mana, 3/4. And the effect is on both party, not just you. If there's a weapon meta, then you can change your opponent's weapon, but then it might become good or bad. If you play this card with the weapon destruction deck, I can see this card being okay, but not amazing never, unless your opponent also plays a really good weapon. And the fact that if you have to combo it with the other weapon destruction cards, the weapon destruction cards aren't so good against non-weapon decks, except for Harrison Jones, I suppose. If you have this card and Harrison Jones, it'll be amazing, but you're only synergizing it with one other cards in the deck. Typically, I recommend 4 to 6 cards that synergize with the card when you put it in the deck to be consistent enough, but then to have 4 to 6, minimum 4 to 6 weapon destruction, it doesn't make sense to have that many weapon destruction in the deck. Unless the meta says, oh my god, I'm gonna run 7 weapons or 9 weapons. Next is Mimi Roan's Head. At the start of your turn, if you have at least 3 mechs, destroy them all and summon Voltron. Wait, I don't actually know how to pronounce this guy. Is the next one no, it's not. Oh, I can pull it off. I can't show it to you at the moment. I'll go over it. It's a charge 8 mana mega win free, can attack 4 times a turn, and it has a 4/8 stats. So it's a 8 mana. Wait, no, it's not gonna be 8 mana. It's gonna be 8 health minion that does 16 damage a turn as a charge. So yeah, it's just. Well, as soon as the Voltrons come out, it's gonna destroy your opponent's field or destroy opponent's face. But can you expect 3 mechanical minions surviving at start of your turn? Really? That's like it's even difficult to have just 3 minions on board, unless you're playing Zoo. But then you have to play Mimitron's Head, and it has to survive. So. In Swarmy mech deck, it might work. I've been kind of pushing towards that Swarmy, very aggressive mech deck. We'll have to see. Otherwise, the 4/5/4/5 is kind of mundane. Especially for the legendary, it's not so good. Pass. Next one, Dr. Boom. Battle Cry, summon 2 1/1 Boombots. Can I go over the Boombots? Hang on. Oh, it's the next one. Alright. The Boombot says the death roll deal 1 to 4 damage to a random enemy. So this guy is an amazing card. But it does die easily. It's one of those cards that deals with AoE pretty well. No, it deals with the Swarmy opponent pretty well because of nature of having extra 1/1s on board, and also deals extra random damage to your opponent's field or opponent's face. So this guy is gonna be amazing versus aggro decks, just like how Baron Geddon is really good. Yeah, and this guy also have a lot of extra health, and Battlecry comes in. Yeah, I can see it being good. It's very solid around cards. But will actually be useful. 7/7 for 7 mana is kind of mundane. It's actually not so mana efficient at all compared to Velen, like if you think about Velen's amazing card. If you just look at the cards, oh my god, 7 mana for 7/7, and it doubles your heal, doubles your everything. But then not many people use it, so it may become one of those cards where if I have 7 mana, I'd rather play other amazing 7-drop cards or 8-drop cards because they're better. It may become like that. Like me personally, I still rather run Sylvanas instead of Dr. Boone. If I have to choose between those two, however, if I want to squeeze in on an extra legendary cards, then maybe it's worth it. Oh. This needs an old shredder. Death roll summon a random legendary minion. Are you kidding? Random legendary minion. So 8 mana typically is worth a... well, according to formula that I said earlier, mana cost times 2 plus 1 stat. This thing should be 8/9, but a lot of 8 mana minions are better than that, such as Ragnaros, Grommash. Gruul is not really worth mentioning, actually. But anyways, this card has amazing board sustainability. It also summons a random legendary minion, and random legendary minion is 5/6 in average. So this guy is the in average, still speaking. This guy is just a high and better, possibly better and heavier version of Cairn. But Cairn is not really used anymore in current meta because it's kinda slow, and it might become like that. Whenever control comes back, this card will be played, and whenever aggro comes down, this card will likely not be played. Unless Taunt Giver is a thing, and it might become that way. And then this card is definitely worth playing, even in fast meta. If you have cards like our Defender Warriors or Sunfury Protector. Yep. Next, we already talked about this card. Just 4/8 for 8 mana, but you can't really play it. Wait, if I get, oh yeah, when you, I don't think this is a card you can have. It has not been confirmed. I really doubt this will be a card. Because 16 damage, 8 health for 8 mana, I don't think it makes sense. But then your opponent can return it back to your hand with the cards like Sap or what's the other card? Well, there are a few other cards like Vanish, Kidnapper, Freezing Trap. So it does make sense to have actually Freezing Trap. Then you can play this card at 10 mana, so that kind of makes sense. And this is one of the newly discovered cards. Foe Reaper 4000 also damages the minion next to whomever he attacks. So splash for the first time, kind of, truly, on a minion coming to an effect. This is one of the cards that will trade the aggro decks, but then it might be a little too slow because it's 8 mana cost. By turn 8, you likely will be dead unless you have a lot of AoEs. Anyways. It's really hard to value this card without talking about the meta of the just meta. And I personally have no idea how meta's gonna flow because we have yet to see about 80 other cards. 80? Yeah, about 80 cards we have yet to see. So until we see those cards, I can't really value this card. It's one of those cards again. But then if a meta says mid-range druid, then this card is the boss, the best card by far. Yeah, I can't really think of any cards that will be better than this card against a deck like mid-range druid, where they will have decent body, but they only have 3 or 4 of them on field because the mana cost is limited. Like Yeti, Spectral Knight, yeah, all those dies all together on Foe Reaper 4000. Otherwise, I don't see it being that useful, as a splash does not come into the factor too much. By turn 8, you either want a finishing card or the card that affects the board immediately, like Ragnaros. But then Ragnaros, since the meta right now is Death Roll, Ragnaros isn't so good against aggro, so 4 Reaper might be a replacement in that meta. That's all I can say for now. Next is the Mechgineer Mechgineer Thermoplug. Sorry about it. Whenever an enemy minion dies, summon a Leopard Gnome. Oh my god, it's the heavy card of the aggro deck. I don't actually know how good this card will be. You can play this card if you're expecting a lot of trade, but then by turn 9 you're not really trading into a lot of your opponent cards. You're trading a lot of your cards into a small number of your opponent card, unless you're killing a zoo or some of a stormy deck that might appear in future. But then you rather want the cards like Alexstrasza to survive against those cards. So this card, I feel like it's another King Crush for common instead of just classes specific. But then again, the meta might say, hey, because you have cards like Jeeves, and you can still have a stormy cards and still have 1 or 2 very heavy cards because you might want it. Why not? In that sense, I can see it being kind of worked, but it's hard to see at the moment. Next, Gnomish Experimental. Experimenter. Draw a card if it's a minion, transform it to Chicken. Chicken is the 0 mana 1/1. I really don't like this card personally, because if it only works in a deck where you have a lot of spells, right? But then if you have a lot of spells in your deck, those leftover minions are very, very valuable, such as Auctioneer. If you transfer Auctioneer into Chicken, you're screwed. It might be worth it in a I guess in a Druid deck, Token Druid deck. Token Druid deck have like 12 to 13 spell cards, so maybe in Arena, this card is 4/3 or 3 mana. Yeah, this card total has a 4/3 or just extra 1/1 on the field. So actually, I just realized in Miracle Rogue deck with Questing Adventure and Double Conceal, this card might be valuable. We'll see. Next. Oh wait, we went over that. Bomb Lobber. Oh, we have a lot of cards to go over. Holy crap, I gotta speed up a little bit. Deal 4 damage to random enemy minion. It's like that Flame Cannon, right? Deal 4 damage to random enemy minion. That card costed 2 mana, this card cost 5, so you're getting 3 mana, 3/3, but you're having 2-in-1 value. So I can definitely see this card being actually pretty good in Arena, but not necessarily in Constructed, unless it literally, the meta says Miracle Rogue. Just because Miracle Rogue can survive better with the cards like hang on, give me a second. That rogue cards that gives a +1 attack to... Oh, there it is. The Goblin Auto Barber. Sorry about that. I wish I had the time to edit all the cards and just talk about it. But then I'd leave in like 6 hours to a training facility, so do understand, please. Anyways, yeah, it's one of those cards just to have 2-in-1 value, but it's like playing 2 cards instead of 1 cards, but it's just same as much as costs. And I'm not sure if a 3 mana 3/3 is that valuable. Next, Nether Bomber. Deal 6 damage to random, split between all other characters. Oh my god, this guy. Mid Bomber really isn't played in Constructed, but it's always almost always played in Arena. So I can see this guy being really valuable in Arena, but not so good in Constructed. Because 6 damage random split between all other characters might be a little too much if you're playing card deck like Control Warrior. And you definitely don't want this guy if you're playing aggro deck, because it will just destroy all your board. And you can only play this card in, because of how heavy this card is, and I think you can only play this card in mid-range to, actually mid-range Druid might be able to use this, or some form of that, like where you just play beefy, kind of heavy minions, but not so heavy, not so legendary. I can see this card being working out. The next is Unstable Portal. Add a random minion to your hands, cost 3 less. A lot of people talk about this card as like, oh my god, amazing card, but I don't actually know. It's not random minion from your deck, it's just absolutely random minion, and as talked about a third of the cards are just useless. Not useless, but just bad for mana cost. Like 10 to 15% of the total cards are 1-drop minions, about a third are 2-drop or less. So statistically, you have better chance at drawing 3 or more minions. But then a third of that also is kind of bad cards for mana cost. But then again, and often, very often, in fact in almost all cases, if you have a bad card for mana cost, if you just make that one less mana, then that card is almost always really amazing card. So it may become like that. It's like the, what's that shaman card? The Farsight, but it costs 1 less, and it's just for mage. So I can see this card being like, if you can spew this card out and get a Cairn and turn you play Unstable Portal on turn 2 and you coin out Cairn as a mage, then it's the best card. We'll have to see. I'm really excited to see this kind of deck. I see it's kind of this card working out. So far this kind of cards never worked out, although it had really good values sometimes. Yeah, I would like to see it in action and in work. I'd like to see this card in action before I say anything. Or although I said plenty of things with the stats. Goblin Blast Mage. If you control a mech, deal 4 damage randomly split among enemy characters, so you can also deal 4 damage to face. So I like this card. It's one of the board controlling card, but with not too much a factor. If a mech becomes a thing, yeah, this card is one of the most amazing card. And 4 mana, 5/4 isn't that bad as far as the card value goes, although it's kind of terrible in Constructed Sin, because it has no other synergy besides the fact that if you control mech, and as a mage, if you already control mech, like as a mage, it's kind of difficult. It can be difficult to protect your minions unless you have a mirror image, but then mirror image is not a mech. So yeah, I can see this working out in aggro mech mage deck if there is such thing. Otherwise, no. Next is a upgrade repair bot. 5/5 for 5 mana, proved itself. It's not that bad. Like all the 5/5 for 5 mana costing cards are not bad, even in Constructed. Like Strangler Tiger, whenever it pops out with the, like some people even used it in BlizzCon qualifiers. It's not a bad card, and Thab is one of the most amazing card, although the battle cries is amazing. To give a friendly mech +4 health, it again, it comes down to whether other synerging mech cards exist in Priest meta in future, but if you're really generous with the stats, 5/9 for 5 mana. Amazing, amazing. And it's a battle cry. It's not like the Death Rattle, so Dark Cultist often is just 3/4, nothing else. But then if you have a mech, this card will be 5/9, not 5/5. Like the Dark Cultist. Dark Cultist about like third the time or more. Somewhere between third to half time, I would say that card is just 3/4 for 3 mana, which isn't bad. But this card might change a few things. Next, it's one of the newest cards that just came out. Fell Cannon at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to a non-mech minion. I think this is the push of a Blizzard of making mid-range Warlock deck out. So far there really hasn't been a good mid-range Warlock deck. It's always been either Zoo or heavy control Handlock deck, but 3/5 for 4 mana isn't that bad. But then if you just have a bunch of mech cards, actually, you know what, even in Zoo type of deck, in just a Stormy type of deck, I think this card can have decent value. And by no means this card can just kill off your Cogmaster. Because Cogmaster is not a mech, as we talked about. At the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to a non-mech minion. Wait a minute, it doesn't say random, although it's kind of implied. That'll be interesting if you can pick it. Oh my god, that'll be so amazing if you can pick the target. Yeah, I'd like to see this card. The Argus in Zoo is like 4/5 for 4 mana, and this card technically can be 5/5 for 4 mana, which is really amazing card. And also as a Zoo, you kind of want the board control often, right? So yeah, I can see a strengthening point playing this card in Zoo or mid-range. Just generally solid around the cards. I don't think this card will go under the radar. Next is a Screwjank Clunker. Battlecry, give a friendly mech +2/+2, but then this card is the Warrior card. I really haven't seen any particular good mech cards in Warrior that is not really heavy. But then this card does seems to be designed to put on not so too heavy cards. It's like Huntmaster but in Warrior version, because it has a lot more health than attack. Instead of 4/3, this guy is 2/4 of 2/5. And instead of giving it, yeah, but it also is give a friendly mech. In current Warrior meta, no warriors use a mech, nor it's gonna make it. It might become hard to make it work. A lot of hunters at the moment do run at least 6 base cards if they want to run 2 Huntmasters. So far I can think of about like 4 cards you might want to put in as a mech in Warrior. I just have to see the rest of mech cards really. Like I really would like to find out if there are key mech cards that you want to put it in as a Warrior, especially in a Control Warrior deck. Next card is a Shield Maiden. I'm really excited to see this card because the only thing that gives the armor in Warrior deck is the Shield Block. And the Armor Smith, but then Armor Smith doesn't really guarantee it's armor. But this guy is basically the Guardian Kings for Warrior. It's not 5/6, but it's a 5/5. Gain 5 armor, so instead of just healing yourself for 5, it gives you extra 5 armor, which is a lot more valuable. I can definitely see this card being in. Yeah, I can see this card even in current meta. You can just play this card instead of Cairn, and this card would be pretty nice addition. This is solid all around cards. I think people will play this card. I think people will try this card out. People have to. at the moment, there aren't that many 6-drops Warrior wants to play besides those 3 legendary cards, Cairn, Sylvanas, and Black Knight. Hogger is sometimes played, but it's not so common. Black Knight is kind of conditional cards. If you have cards like Big Game Hunter, it's hard to run both or triple of, especially if you have Harrison Jones. And the Cairn, often it's just too slow of cards. So in Stormy meta, Shield Maiden, you'll be amazing, especially since often you don't actually have armor to use your Shield Slam, but then these cards give 5 armor for 1 extra mana compared to 5 mana 5/5. So yeah, decent card. And we're gonna go over spare parts now. I think the only cards that are left are spare cards. 1 armor plating, give 1 give a minion +1 health. I actually talk about it. It's the spare parts is like +1 health. And there it is. Give a minion +1 health. In Arena, it's an amazing card. It's one of the best cards, but in Constructed, not so much. +1 health. That's not coming to factor too often. And this one is a freeze a minion. This card is very situational, but if you're control, it will give you. If you're control, this card is amazing. If you're aggro, this card is amazing. If you're mid-range, this card is pretty good. So yeah, this card is pretty cool. Emergency Cullen. I'm excited to pick these cards up. Like it frees your opponents when you're playing Swarmy. Oh my god, I can't wait. Next one is Finicky Clockfield. Give a friendly minion stealth until your next turn. So basically conceal, but for your swarm mid deck, or not necessarily all swarmy deck. This card can be used to protect your key cards, like Knife Juggler, if you're playing Zoo deck. Why am I keep going back to the swarmy mech deck? That's the thing. Like I think that is a theme. It's just gonna be a battle between control and swarmy mech as soon as the Goblin versus Gnome comes out from the cards we've seen so far. And stealth obviously is not too much a factor in control. Actually, this control versus control, stealth is amazing. But then I don't know if you want to play, if you're gonna have a spare parts at all, if you're playing control deck. Yeah, a lot of cards that gives spare parts so far are found in small drop cards such as Tinker Town Technician, that is 3-drop, or Clockwork Gnome, which is 1-drop. So yeah, we'll just have to see if we can actually get a spare part as a control deck. Reversing Switch is swap the minions attack and health. This card is really good in control deck, and really good in actually yeah, really good in, can be really good in Stormy deck, because a lot of cards, a lot of the taunt cards that you have to get through have a lot more health than attack, such as Shieldmaster, 3 health, 3 attack, 5 health. Cells Belcher, same thing. The Sunwalker is a little out of question, but it's not often used. And Drew the Claw, +2 attack for 1 mana. This card is like Arcane Shot, so yeah, I can definitely see this card being full effect. And Rusty Horn, give a minion taunt. Again, giving a taunt might not be necessarily good, but then I can definitely see it being really good to protect your key cards like Undertaker or Knife Juggler. So yeah, this swarmy mech decks that are gonna come out is gonna be really tricky to go against. Time Rewinder, return a flaming minion to your hand. This card is also good if you're playing a Stormy deck, because Stormy deck tends to have really mana efficient cards. If you think about 2 attack, 1 mana for 1-drop. Actually, you know what? Let's think about cards like a Abusive Surgeon. There are a lot of cards that will give you huge value for low mana, so if you can just return it back to your hand and play it again, it can be decent. Next one is Rolling Blades. Give a minion +1 attack. I don't see this card being too useful. But then if you're playing cards like the deck like Zoo deck, might as well keep it just so that you can throw it away and you don't throw away your Soulfire when you're playing Doomguard, or vice versa. Next, oh, that's it. Yeah, that's it. We didn't over all the cards. That was that was an hour and 10 minutes review. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. We'll be going away for a month, like I said, and see you guys in a month. Sorry about this episode being kind of rushed down because I'm leaving in 5 hours now, and I have to sleep. So love you all. Hope you have a well and safe 1 month. I will see you guys then. Goodbye.